This is Right to Life Radio. And now, here's your host, John Girardi.
Welcome to Right to Life Radio. Abortion extremism right here in Fresno. What kinds of stuff are residents at Community Hospital at UCSF Fresno learning? We're going to talk about it today on the show. John Girardi with Right to Life of Central California here with you, as always, righttolifeca.org if you want to learn more about us and what we do. And joining me in studio, Mr. Jonathan Keller from the California Family Council. How's it going, Jonathan?
That's me. Happy to be here.
All right.
Per usual, back from a trip to Sacramento earlier this week. And never a shortage of craziness, whether it's from the Capitol to right here in our backyard.
Well, I hadn't planned on this, but any rumblings of terrible pro-abortion legislation coming up? I mean, I know we're kind of getting close to the deadline for people to submit legislation.
Well, in fact, the deadline was yesterday.
Oh, okay.
So we're still waiting. There's a bunch of bills that we're kind of monitoring. There's all these spot bills that people will throw out here.
Oh, and then they can amend them later to make them worse.
So technically, the deadline was yesterday, the 16th of February, Friday the 16th of February. But we're still waiting to see. There is actually, John, a chance that I will say maybe we might actually have some positive legislation, if you can believe it. We may even have, there's a rumor. I don't want to spill too much, but we have been quietly shopping around some possible language that would be kind of an equal opportunity bill to say, hey, public schools, you're promoting all these abortion clinics, Planned Parenthood, etc., to your students. Maybe you should give equal time to pregnancy centers.
Oh, okay.
Because shouldn't students have all their options, all the information? Shouldn't they be supported no matter what choice they make?
I somehow feel as though the answer to that from many quarters will be no. They should not have all the choices. The only choice they should have is Planned Parenthood. But
so the interesting thing will be if we can find a legislator who is willing to take this language up, if nothing else, it will be very interesting to see how our friends on the pro-abortion side of the aisle try to square that circle of saying that, oh, no, we don't want to ban resources. We don't want to ban information.
They're pretty open that they would like to ban pregnancy centers. I mean, they've made that pretty clear. So anyway, let's see. All right. Speaking of choices and giving equal time to both sides of the aisle, this does not appear to be a thing that is happening with the educational programming at UCSF Fresno. So UCSF Fresno hosted last Friday a conference on basically issues involved with OBGYN care in the Central Valley.
And to clarify, John, I think everyone's familiar, but UCSF is the University of California,
San Francisco. Yeah. So UCSF, its medical school, has basically an extension of it, sort of a center for resident training and medical student training, et cetera, in Fresno, right next to Community. And they send residents and med students to Fresno to help learn and work and do practicum and stuff like that. And they have different, obviously, it's kind of focused on education. So they have educational events there where people can go to get continuing education credits and things of that sort. So they hosted this event last Friday, Friday before last, not yesterday, the week before that, regarding OBGYN provision. And we've talked about her before on the show, Dr. Meg Autry. So Dr. Autry is the head of OBGYN at UCSF Fresno. She's an OBGYN from San Francisco. And I don't think I would be talking too crazy to say that she is an avid advocate for legal abortion. I think she would not even object to such a description. An avid advocate for legal abortion, a ferocious advocate for legal abortion, maybe I would even say. So much so that she has founded a nonprofit organization whose goal is to purchase and outfit a boat to place in federal waters off the Gulf Coast to provide abortions for women who live in Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, because those states have restricted legal abortion without much of a clear sense of various things, like how do you provide emergency care for someone having a surgical abortion in a boat? How do you, like, oh, they're not a clear path there. Anyway, so this very extreme abortion advocate. So she gave a talk in which she discussed abortion provision and a lot of the sort of lies that pro-abortion left is told. For example, we talked last week on the show. We She has repeatedly in her work, in other talks she's given, repeated the lie of, oh, abortion is just as safe as Tylenol, which we know to be ridiculous. The number of people who, there's a, what is it, Jonathan? It's a 4% hospitalization rate. That's right there on the label of mifepristone.
Yeah.
There's a 4% chance that you're going to need to be hospitalized after taking the abortion pill from excess bleeding, excess hemorrhaging, etc. We discussed it last week with Tony McFadden, her experience going through the abortion pill process. That was the most pain she'd ever experienced in her life. So first of all, we repeat that lie. And this consistent thing of sort of overlooking the health risks associated with the abortion pill, especially with protocols where women take the abortion pill without going to see a doctor first. So during her talk, she discussed this and was asked during the talk, during the Q&A portion, was asked about this. Well, what happens when someone in this setting has an ectopic pregnancy? And she didn't really have a great answer for it, other than to say, well, ectopic pregnancies don't happen any more often in a pill abortion setting than they do in a normal non-pill abortion setting, without like the obvious problem of obviously this is less safe, because if you're getting the abortion pill and you're doing it through telemedicine, or you're doing it through a self-managed abortion process, which I actually did learn from her that those are two different things. So there's self-managed abortion where you're not interacting with a doctor at all. You're just kind of,
basically you're
getting the abortion pill, and probably you're getting the abortion pill illegally somehow,
or overseas, or from Mexico or China or India.
Right. Which she very casually mentioned that there are websites that provide this from. Yeah. Without really like talking about, hey, this is illegal to do. That is actually different from a telemedicine prescribed abortion process, where you are actually interacting, albeit via telemedicine. So no one's getting an ultrasound here. You can interact via telemedicine with some provider who recommends, who can prescribe you the abortion pill. So nonetheless, no one in either of those two scenarios is getting an ultrasound. So your ability to detect an ectopic pregnancy is thereby hindered. I actually, via the chat, because I was attending this thing via Zoom, I mentioned during it, hey, here's a piece from the New England Journal of Medicine back in 2013. This woman who had a ruptured ectopic, ruptured her fallopian tube during an ectopic pregnancy. It was a very serious health event because she was doing a self-managed abortion. And she said, well, that happens, no more or less frequently during a pill abortion process than otherwise. And I just thought, well, that's not the question. Isn't it more dangerous if you can't detect, if you're not doing an ultrasound and thereby not detecting someone's having an ectopic pregnancy? Yes, I'm sure ectopic pregnancies happen in the same percentages whether you get an ultrasound or you don't. But isn't it more dangerous for you to have an ectopic pregnancy in a scenario where you're not getting ultrasounds? Like that seems to me one of the big roles of the ultrasound is detecting problems like that. So that just seemed to be brushed aside, not answered. One of the really interesting exchanges, though, and I don't know if this is advocate brain on her part, if this is belligerent activist posturing or genuine ignorance, was the question was raised, by one of the people attending, well, what do you think about, where do you draw the line? I mean, like, do you draw a line at viability? And she said, no, I don't really draw a line anywhere. I don't see any lines. But then someone asked, wait, what's the law in California? Isn't it that we're only allowed to do abortions up till viability?
Presumably, this is a provider or an OBGYN.
Yeah, this is a doctor asking, or either a doctor or a med student or a resident or somebody asking her this question during this conference. And now I know, and I will inform you, dear readers, about the somewhat complicated situation of California law regarding abortion after fetal viability. So California law on this was fairly uncontroversial until just a year or two ago. Abortion was legal in California up till fetal viability. It was only legal after fetal viability if the doctor determined that the pregnancy posed a risk to maternal health. But a doctor actually had to make a determination like that. That's the law. That's what's still to this day on the books in the California Health and Safety Code. There is some argument today over whether Proposition 1 has overturned that. So Proposition 1 was passed in 2022. It put a right to abortion into the California state constitution, but it was a very broad right that the language of it was very broad. And it said the state may not interfere with a woman's right to an abortion. It didn't say a pre-viability abortion, and post-viability abortions when the mother's health is threatened, just an abortion. And there are differences of opinion among different authors, some of the legislators who sponsored the bill versus some of the activists who wrote the bill over why Prop 1 was worded the way it was worded. The legislators say, no, it's not changing anything about California abortion law. The politicians say that. But then the activists, some of them were saying, no, we deliberately left out any language about viability because we want doctors to be able to perform abortions at any time during pregnancy. Viability, past viability, whatever. So in response to this question, well, isn't California law on abortion that it's only legal up to viability? Dr. Autry's response is, nope. There's no restriction. None. And she affirmed it like a couple of times. So then, because I couldn't help myself, in the chat, I asked the question of, are you saying there's no limitation because of Proposition 1? Her response to that was apparently not getting that I was talking about 2022's Proposition 1. She thought I was talking about the Proposition 1 that's on the ballot this March. So this March, for the election, there's another California Proposition 1. It's something about state funding for like mental health resources.
A Gavin Newsom special.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with abortion. So her response was, I think Proposition 1 is about mental health resources. I'm like, no, not that Prop 1, the one that had to do with abortion. Like the
that
one
we literally passed less than 2 years ago.
And also, like, it only got passed in 2022. Like, I'm not talking about a Proposition 1 that got passed in like 1993 or something like that. Well, this is very recent.
Yeah, the irony is, and I realize number one is different, and there is a Prop 1 on the ballot this year.
Well,
but
sure.
If you talk about Prop 8 in the context of marriage,
yeah, everyone knows which Prop 8 you're talking about.
If you're on a call talking about abortion, and you're literally specifically talking about viability limits for abortion.
Yeah.
And you mention Proposition 1, where there was
put a right to abortion into the state constitution,
where there was a $10+ million coordinated marketing campaign that every Democrat in the state legislature
endorsed,
voted to put on the ballot,
which I'm sure this woman voted for.
Yes.
Well, it's like talking about property taxes and mentioning Prop 13. Wait, which Prop 13 are you talking about? Anyway, so
that's why, John, I don't think she misunderstood. I think she was being willfully obtuse.
All right. Well, we'll debate whether this is willful obtusity. Is that a word? Whether this was being willfully obtuse or just plain old ignorant. We'll dig into that next. This is Right to Life Radio on Power Talk. Back with Right to Life Radio, we're discussing the extreme abortion advocacy going on at UCSF. UCSF Fresno, which is a educational entity that's right next to community hospital, and they were talking about some really distressing stuff. A couple of things. So one of the things you had presenting to all these doctors, nurses, med students, residents, et cetera, Dr. Meg Autry, who's the head of OBGYN at UCSF Fresno, and a massive abortion activist. And it's kind of, I think this is the point that really kind of distresses me, Jonathan, is this attitude throughout. And I wonder how much this infects medical schools from sea to shining sea. The absolute lack of questioning, lack of debate, lack of any sort of second guessing over whether legal abortion and the provision of abortion by healthcare practitioners is anything, no discussion whether this is anything other than hunky-dory. This complete assumption that state laws restricting abortion are bad.
Yep.
Are just an infringement on the rights of women, blah, 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 blah. Not even acknowledging that there is some argument on the other side, that there are OBGYNs on the other side of this debate, that there even is a debate.
So, John, I will give you an example on that. I think I will at least speak for myself that I am, generally speaking, a pretty strong supporter of the Second Amendment.
Okay.
I own multiple firearms.
Okay.
And even in the state of California, with all the crazy restrictions and difficulties, I have taken advantage of the restrictive laws that we have, and I own certain firearms here in California. Okay. I talked with some of my friends in other parts of the country, and we looked tragically, earlier this week, there was this shooting at the Kansas City Chiefs parade in Kansas City, where, multiple people were shot. One person tragically lost their lives. That is incredibly tragic. As a strong Second Amendment supporter, I can still acknowledge that people who are on the far other end of the spectrum, that are gun rights restrictionists, I can argue and say, I understand your concerns, and I realize that this is an imperfect system within which we live, and there might be occasions where some kinds of restrictions on gun rights or on some types of requirements, or whether it's registration or safe storage or yada, 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 I can understand that there could be some good points that people have, and it might be worthwhile for us to look possibly at some of those restrictions, even as someone who fully believes that there's a right to owning firearms.
Right.
But as you said, it feels like the people on the abortion side of this debate are like, nope, there is not a single restriction.
Not one. That there's not one argument in favor of restricting it at all at any point.
Yep.
Yeah. Like,
for any reason.
I mean, they don't even seem to have much of a sense of like what an outlier the United States is relative to, every country in Europe, pretty much. Like, every country in Europe bans abortion pretty much after 20 weeks of pregnancy. Pretty much all of them. There's no country in Europe that allows abortion after the 20-week point of pregnancy. There's no sense that anything other than this most maximal pro-abortion position, to the extent of, like, again, this is the head of OBGYN at UCSF. This woman wants to outfit a boat to float in federal waters to perform abortions in the Gulf Coast, because Texas and Louisiana, et cetera, have outlawed abortion. Like, there's not even a hint that this is wrong. Also, one of the things that was discussed during this, and I might have a more comprehensive take on all this. I might do it via writing. I'm going to get the recording of this talk and might write about it. I think that one of the things they talked about was they were bewailing that medical students at medical schools in a bunch of states were not going to get training in doing abortions. Which is like, okay, first of all, California law already says you don't have to do abortions. Basically, medical schools and medical training programs cannot require someone to do abortions as a condition of getting their degree or getting their certification, getting their medical education. Right? California law protects your right not to participate in abortions as an individual going through medical school. Medical schools can't reject you because you don't want to do abortions. And they're saying, well, all these medical students are not being trained in doing abortions. And the skills necessary to do an abortion are necessary for basic healthcare, even outside of abortion, which is, I am sure, a lie. I would have to be like 100% sure. I am almost 100% sure. If someone has experienced a miscarriage, medical school students are not going to be banned from performing a D&E to remove the body, to remove the body of the child who died via the miscarriage. So it sort of astonishes me, the sort of blinkers they have on, which are so extreme. It's even to the left of, if you will, to the left of existing California law.
Yes.
Which they don't seem to know or acknowledge or have any sense of. So anyway, when we return, I want to talk a little bit about Roe and about how abortion groups are sort of nervous about President Biden and his messaging on this topic, how he wants to restore Roe. Well, abortion activists want to go further than that. That's next on Right to Life Radio. Back with Right to Life Radio. And I got to say, Mr. Jonathan, I love when anything that sort of annoys abortion activists always makes me happy. And I am finding it so funny how President Biden still has better political instincts than most abortion activists do, in spite of the fact that a special counsel has determined that he doesn't have a good enough memory to actually be prosecuted with anything.
Yes.
So this is a really funny story from Vox. Now, Vox, for those who don't know, is an online kind of newsy opinion outlet, which is consistently very, very hardcore left wing.
Yes, that's fair to say.
Yeah, it's our reliable.
Founded by our friend, who was it originally? Ezra Klein, I think.
He's not our friend.
Yes,
but
yes.
We just say that. So yeah, Vox is extremely left wing. They have legal authors Ian Millhiser. We always love reading his articles because he's very, very liberal legal commentator, and he always has this sort of Chicken Little, like the sky is falling sort of approach to what's going on at the court, which thankfully, with the Dobbs decision, he was finally proven right.
Yeah.
So this is a piece from Vox written by Rachel Cohen. Abortion rights groups don't want to, quote, restore Roe, but they won't fight Biden on it. Many reproductive health organizations want to codify stronger standards. They're not going to pick that fight this year. When Joe Biden and Kamala Harris held their first joint campaign event of 2024 last month in Northern Virginia, they left no doubt that codifying abortion rights would be central to the president's reelection bid. With the rally time to honor what would have been the 51st anniversary of Roe v. Wade, Biden stood under a large Restore Roe sign, and beside supporters holding smaller posters to, quote, defend choice. We need the protections of Roe v. Wade in every state, and we can do it. You can do it.
You know, John,
Biden stressed at the event.
I just have to interrupt you real quick because it's the first time you using that accent made me think for the first time. You know who President Biden, at least your impersonation, reminds me of?
Who does it remind you of, John?
Senor Card Gauge.
Senor Card Gauge from the Homestar Runner cartoons.
All right. Five of our listeners, Miles Carmody, will get that joke.
Yes.
But nobody else will get that.
Mid 2000s Flash animation internet humor that we're referencing here.
Thanks, Kamala.
Producer Colton has no idea what we're talking about.
Totally lost.
Child of the 2010s. All right.
That's right.
Let's keep going. We need the protections of Roe v. Wade in every state, and we can do it. You can do it, Biden stressed at the event. Give me a Democratic House of Representatives and give me a bigger Democratic Senate, and we will pass a new law restoring the protections of Roe v. Wade, and I will sign it immediately. In subsequent campaign blasts, the Biden-Harris team reiterated the Roe message. A vote for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris is a vote to restore Roe, said Julie Chavez Rodriguez, Biden's campaign manager. It's simple, the president tweeted to his nearly 34 million followers under a graphic calling to restore the protections of Roe v. Wade once and for all. After the 2022 and 2023 election cycles, it may not be surprising that Biden is running on an abortion rights platform. What's new, though, is that prominent abortion rights groups are biting their tongues about Roe and, quote, pro-choice messaging that they disdain and have been trying to steer politicians away from. In the weeks and months following the June 2022 Dobbs v. Jackson decision, it was more common to hear influential leaders within the abortion rights movement talk about the necessity of going beyond Roe v. Wade, not going back to it. The old legal standard, they argued, was never good enough and left too many people without access to the reproductive health care they needed. I am making a highly skeptical face here.
Yes.
When a bipartisan group of lawmakers introduced a bill in summer 2022 to codify the legal protections that existed under Roe, bipartisan, who was the one Republican who signed on? Was it Susan Collins or somebody?
Maybe. Yeah, it could have been.
Or Lisa Murkowski? I mean,
Yeah.
I assume it was one of them.
Yeah, it could have been both. Either.
To codify the legal protections that existed under Roe just before the Dobbs decision was issued, a coalition of reproductive rights groups came out quickly against it. Activists instead had their eyes set on the Women's Health Protection Act, a more sweeping federal bill that would not only restore the pre-Dobbs status quo, but also ban most state-level restrictions as well as religious exemptions for healthcare providers. WHPA passed the House in 2021, but failed twice in the Senate. Thank God. The group's opposition to anything incremental meant a more moderate compromise effort to protect abortion rights in Congress was never seriously attempted after Roe. The hope to go beyond Roe hasn't disappeared. Bolstered by decisive ballot measures to protect abortion rights over the last 18 months, election wins for Democrats who campaigned heavily on reproductive freedom, and surveys that suggest voters have grown even more supportive of abortion rights since Roe's repeal. Many activists have pressed Democrats to avoid using Roe language at all and even steer clear of popular, quote, pro-choice messaging they believe helped normalize restricting abortion over the years. Yet, with the 2024 election now closer and stakes on abortion access even higher, reproductive rights groups have decided to swallow their concerns and enthusiastically endorse the president's re-election strategy. Now, a couple of things to say about all this. First of all, the idea that Roe didn't go far enough kind of bewilders me when you understand what Roe did. Roe said, and its progeny, Planned Parenthood versus Casey, which I think is really what we're talking about, but Biden is so... I don't want to keep taking cheap shots at the president's memory, but Biden
He won't remember. It's okay.
He won't remember. That's fine. Biden is so dim when he talks about abortion and so either ignorant or stupid or doesn't know the details. He constantly talked about Roe as if it was still 100% on the books, and it wasn't. Planned Parenthood versus Casey, which was decided in 1992, was really Roe's kind of successor. And it replaced a lot of the legal reasoning of Roe with a new sort of body of reasoning. And so it was actually more operative. And Biden was also like, oh, the reasoning of Roe, it just makes sense. Just read it. And it's like very few people on either the left or the right, even in the scholarly left-wing legal academic community, pretty much nobody thinks Roe was like a great decision. Probably the majority view on the legal, academic, and activist left was best expressed by Justice Ginsburg during her dissent in the Gonzalez v. Carhart case, which I believe was 2007. So Justice Ginsburg in that case expressed sort of a lack of satisfaction with Roe's legal reasoning and basically thought that grounding it in this sort of loosey-goosey notion of what is freedom as defined by the 14th Amendment it was not the best way to ground the right to legal abortion. She thought that the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment was a stronger way to ground the right to abortion. She thought abortion was necessary for women's equality in America. Yes, you heard that right. Justice Ginsburg thought that abortion was a necessary condition for equality for women, that women could not be equal to men without legal abortion, which is kind of a monstrous thing to think. Anyway, so a lot of the activists left agree with her. So I think a lot of them don't really want Roe back. Like if you ask the most legal academic pro-choicers and most of the activist movement that's aware of these legal issues, they don't really want abortion back in the Roe v. Wade codified form. They don't want that. So what they would prefer is something much more decisive and sweeping. Now, the end result, though, I think is largely the same, would be largely the same. Roe v. Wade didn't allow almost any state regulation of abortion whatsoever. Roe v. Wade mandated legal abortion through fetal viability, and then still mandated legal abortion past fetal viability as long as it was a pregnancy where the mother's health was implicated. So Roe v. Wade effectively mandated on all the states legal abortion for all 40 weeks of pregnancy for any reason. So that the problem, though, is that,
but that's not far enough, John.
Yeah, but
we don't want to go back to that standard.
Yeah, we don't. We'd hate to go back. Yeah, and the thing is, though, that so this idea that they're sort of like miffed at Biden over this, it also, what they don't grasp is just how extreme they are and off-putting they are. Biden has actually played the politics of the abortion issue. Biden's not doing a lot else right, but I think, and obviously, I think supporting this is, ethically monstrous. But I think he has played the politics of abortion correctly by basically saying, look, he's played the politics of abortion perfectly. He's said he is looking out at the landscape and realizing people think that the status quo before Dobbs was better. They think that the status quo before Dobbs was something moderate.
Right.
And the American people...
Well, that was the consensus we could all agree on for 50 years.
For 50 years, that was the consensus. It was the law of the land. And when you poll Americans on abortion, they are wildly inconsistent with themselves. They will say both that they like Roe v. Wade, but they would like abortion to be banned after the first trimester. Well, guess what, guys? You cannot hold those two same thoughts at the same time. Roe v. Wade outlaws states from banning abortion after the first trimester. Okay, so I mean that's. But people have been duped, I think, by the media into thinking that Roe v. Wade was something moderate. It's not. So Biden is actually like completely correct here politically. He's doing the smart thing politically. Again, I think ethically what he's doing is monstrous. I think ethically his position is monstrous and terrible and bad for women, bad for the blah, 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 blah. Roe is very popular. So to run on a campaign of restore Roe is smart for him, and not to wade too much into other areas of American politics. It's like the only thing he's got going for himself right now.
I think that's correct.
Yeah. I mean, it has not been a great month to be Joe Biden. Biden polls badly against Trump in general. He polls badly against Trump on the economy, on immigration, on foreign policy, on essentially everything. Biden, on essentially every issue, Biden does worse than Trump does, except for one. Biden's doing better on abortion.
Right.
And when we return, I want to talk about this trend, this tendency, and how we get to a place where Americans are more comfortable with Dobbs as the norm in American political life. That is next on Right to Life Radio. Back with Right to Life Radio. All right, Jonathan, we're in this weird political place here.
Yes.
Where Roe v. Wade is still popular. And I think Biden is having at least some success politically by campaigning to restore Roe, as much as abortion activists are uncomfortable with him using that language and specifically referencing Roe v. Wade and stuff like that. So, but I think it's politically smart for Biden because why? People think of Roe as the norm. They think of it as some kind of moderate norm. And this recalls to my mind the Obamacare historical example. Okay, so Obamacare gets passed. It is not very popular when it gets passed. Yeah, so it gets passed in 2010. Obama et al. Get
Obliterated.
in the 2010 elections.
Literally a shellacking, I think is what he
and
said.
it's a direct response to Obamacare. And in 2014, when Obamacare is still an issue, Democrats lose a bunch of seats. Obamacare was not popular. And it took a while for America to get into a Obamacare is the norm mindset. It took a long time for America to get there. And I think we are now there. You don't really hear Republican politicians talking, and especially after in 2017, Republicans failed to repeal Obamacare. You don't really hear any Republicans anymore talking about repealing Obamacare. I don't think anybody on the Republican side in the primaries, I don't think Trump's running on it. I don't think DeSantis is running on it or ran on it. I don't think Haley's running. Nobody's running on repealing Obamacare anymore. And especially because I think a lot of Republicans got their clocks cleaned. A lot of congressional Republicans got their clocks cleaned because they voted to repeal Obamacare, and they were able to be hit by, well, Obamacare extended Medicaid coverage to this whole group of people. Do you want to take Medicaid coverage away from these people?
Well,
So there came a point in American politics, and it was probably around 2018, 2019, where Obamacare is now probably just here to stay. Like, it's not getting repealed. I'm wondering if we'll get to a point like that with Dobbs. I think that the pro-life position keeps losing. Since 2022, since June of 2022, when the Dobbs decision came down, Republicans have lost every statewide ballot initiative where abortion was on the ballot, including disastrously in places like Ohio.
Sadly, yes.
I wonder if that is our, what the 2010 primary was, what the 2010 elections were for Democrats in reaction against Obamacare. I'm wondering if what's happening right now with abortion-focused elections is the Dobbs/abortion equivalent of that. And if Dobbs can stay on the books, if Democrats cannot pass a nationwide federal bill to recodify Roe v. Wade or some other sweeping nationwide abortion legalization policy, will the American people come to accept Dobbs as the norm? Come to accept that some states have illegal abortion, some states have legal abortion, and that's it. Will they come to accept that as the norm?
I think it is possible. But the one big difference is that in the case of Obamacare, the thing that I think made it more difficult to repeal was that it was giving something to people. In the case of Medicare expansion, Medicaid expansion.
Sure.
And I think it is a lot harder to take away a benefit that has been granted,
right?
Even if impopularly.
Yeah.
As opposed to, I think the Democrats, sadly, have done a very good job of saying, no.
They're phrasing it as a right that was
something away from you,
and we're trying to give the right back. Yeah.
Whereas on the flip side, it was, well, the Democrats, no, we gave you something, they're trying to take it away.
Sure.
So that's the question on the status quo.
Maybe.
I hope that you are right. I hope that it kind of settles into this.
I hope
yeah.
Well, it makes it clear that, a nationwide bill to legalize abortion is on the table for after the 2024 election. That'll do it for Right to Life Radio. We'll see you next time on Power Talk.